Hello everybody, and welcome to this special Institute for Government advice session on our internship programmes. My name's Nicola Blacklaws, I'm the IFG's recruitment manager, and every year at IFG we recruit a group of interns to work with us, 1 for our communications team and 6 for our research teams. Our internships are 12-month paid full-time positions, and our interns play a really key part in our work. They're a really important part of the team here. And it's now recruitment season, so applications for our next communications intern are already open with an application deadline on the 2nd of April, and applications for our next set of research interns will be opening in the next few weeks around Easter. So what we want to use the next hour for is to provide a bit of an insight into being an IFG intern, what it's like to work here, and what the application process is like. We know that if you've never worked in a think tank or a government or politics related job before, it's not always super clear what it is that think tanks actually do or what working in one's like. And that's also becomes more difficult if you don't have anybody to ask. If you don't know anyone who works in these sorts of jobs, you know, how are you supposed to find out what they're like? And we've found that both through our own research and in research done by others, that this is often especially the case for people who belong to groups who are currently underrepresented in the think tank sector at the moment. So particularly people from a minority ethnic group, people with disabilities, people from lower income backgrounds. So if that's you, and if you've heard of the IFG or you've seen our internships advertised in the past maybe, or you're thinking about working in the government policy space, and you've thought, oh, you know, that sounds interesting, but I'm not sure if that's something I'd enjoy, or I'm not sure if I'm the sort of person that they're looking for, then we hope that the next hour will sort of help you with some of those questions, and by the end you'll know a little bit more about what think tanks do and what the IFG does, what working here is like, and sort of what to expect from applying to an internship with us, and also hopefully we'll have convinced you to apply as well. So to do that, you're going to hear from 4 of our current interns who are on the stage with me today, so Callum, Bryony, Darwin and Samir. And we've got lots of time for questions from the audience at the end. So you can submit your questions via the Slido link, and you can start doing that as early as you like, as things occur to you, and we'll do our best to get to as many of them as we can. You can also give a thumbs up to other people's questions that you want to be answered as well. A couple of final housekeeping bits before I hand over to Callum and Bryony. This session is obviously being live streamed, but it's also being recorded, so it'll be up on our website in the next day or so for you to listen back to, watch back at a later date if you want. We will send a link round as well to that recording to everyone who's registered when that's available, and we'll also be circulating a feedback form to everyone who's registered, so please do take a second to fill that out. It's really helpful for us to know how you found the session, and also to know a little bit more about who we're reaching. And finally, as I said at the start, we have 2 sorts of internships at IFG, so communications and research. Today's session, we're mostly going to be focusing on the research internships in particular, but much of what we're going to talk about will apply to the communications internship as well. So now we've got all of that out of the way, I will hand over to Callum.
Hi everyone, thanks for coming along to our event. My name is Callum, I'm an intern on the Public Bodies and Regulation team. And presenting this section with me is...
Hi, I'm Bryony, and I'm on the one-year internship at the Institute for Government, which we normally shorten to IFG, and I'm on the devolution team.
And we're going to give you a very brief overview of what exactly it is the IFG does, what it's like to be an intern here from our perspective, and what sort of things we get up to on a day-to-day basis. This section will be about 10 minutes before we hand back over to Nicola, who will talk more about the application process. It's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, so if there's anything that we don't cover, make sure to put that in the Slido, and we will try to answer your questions at the Q&A at the end of the session. Without any further ado, Bryony's going to tell you a bit more about what the IFG does.
Yeah, so the Institute for Government is a think tank. Think tanks are basically ideas factories. So at the IFG, we conduct research, make recommendations, and seek to influence government. While this is true for many think tanks, the IFG has our particular focus or niche, which is to make government more effective. And to that end, we focus on suggesting improvements to government structures and processes rather than criticising policies in a political way. So our research is always evidence-based and feeds into our recommendations, and this is our focus rather than furthering a particular political agenda, as we're not aligned with a political party. So how do we make an impact? As an organisation, we make an impact by recommending changes to government and those changes being implemented, by helping people in and around government do their jobs better and more effectively through practical training, often through the IFG Academy, which helps to improve the work of those within government and helps those outside government to understand it. And by improving and influencing public debates about policy, explaining and analysing what's happening, and trying to reach and engage a wide audience through initiatives such as our Inside Briefing podcast. So, and just a few notes of what the organisation's structure is like. So we have our director, Hannah White, and deputy director, Emma Norris. And then we have our communications, partnerships, and events team, which focus on how our research messages are spread through editing our work, marketing our work, or putting on events that feed into our work where we're able to share our research findings. And then the research teams are led by program directors who report to the main directors, and within those teams, the interns are the junior team members. Within the IFG, we have multiple teams that focus on different aspects of government, and those circled, ministers, civil service, public services, public finances, public bodies, and devolution, are the teams that have interns assigned to them. And interns do mostly work within that team. So I'm the research assistant on the devolution team, so I mostly do research on distributing powers to the nations, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and the regions, Greater Manchester. But don't worry about being assigned to a team that you don't know much about, because I didn't know anything about English devolution before I rocked up and turned up on the job. So what's the IFG's work culture like? So the Institute for Government is super friendly. You can approach colleagues to ask for advice and support, and people are happy to share their time and skills with you. So just as two quick examples, I really wanted to work on turning data into interactive charts, and our resident data scientist, Philip, was really generous with his time, going through new software with me and suggesting improvements, even though he's obviously busy on multiple different things. The other example is that we're provided with subsidised lunches, so often you end up sitting with staff of all seniority levels, just having a chat together, sometimes even about work. This leads on to my next point, that the IFG has a really collaborative culture, so you get to work together both within your team and more broadly, and make meaningful contributions within a group and feel really listened to. It's also an inclusive culture where the IFG welcomes people from a range of backgrounds and experiences and encourages you to be yourself rather than to try and fit into a mould. And on that topic, what is the IFG's work culture not like? So there's lots of stereotypes around working in politics and government in general, and they can be a bit off-putting. So just to set the record straight, not everyone went to Oxbridge, not everyone has a postgraduate degree. While you should be interested in government and how it works, you don't need to come in with a ton of hyper-specific, specialised knowledge. You're going to become a government nerd on the job. Politics often comes across as a shouty, macho environment, and the stereotype is everyone is angry and shouting, and that's not what the IFG is like at all. And finally, you can have gained your interest in government in loads of different ways. You don't have to have studied politics. For example, I studied history and human rights law, and another intern had studied a science degree. And with that, I'll pass over to Callum to explore what being an intern at the IFG might look like.
Thanks, Bryony. So hopefully you know a bit more about what the IFG does, and I'm going to take you through what it is we as interns actually do on a day-to-day basis and what sort of skills you need. So for the research interns, there's a clue in the name. The role involves a lot of research. What this looks like can vary depending on what research team you're on and what project you're working on at the time, but it will usually consist of some combination of literature reviews, which is something you might be familiar with from university. It's about reading lots of reports, articles, sometimes academic journals, to create an overview of the current research on a topic and identifying areas for further research. Oh, Sorry. There's also quantitative research, which will involve working with data and creating charts and graphs. What exactly the data is that you'll be working with will depend a lot on your team. So for the public finances intern, that might mean working with a lot of government spending data, whereas if you're on the civil service team, it might be working with civil service people survey data or staff numbers, that sort of thing. There's also qualitative research, which is my personal favorite. This involves research interviews, talking to people like MPs, civil servants, senior figures in public bodies that can offer an interesting insight into the area of work that your team is working on. This is a really exciting opportunity to get some more rich, detailed data, and is something that you don't get the chance to do in a lot of other jobs. This research is used to inform written pieces of work. Most often, interns write explainers, which are short, about 1,000-word pieces for a non-specialist audience that aim to make a difficult topic easier to understand and answer a few kind of key factual questions. But there's also the opportunity to get involved in more in-depth, longer reports. And I'll come back to that shortly. Beyond research, there are also a range of other responsibilities that research interns can get involved with, and these include helping to organize private roundtables, which are discussions with experts on a topic, and public events, which are a great opportunity to develop skills beyond research. For the communications intern, there are a broad range of responsibilities, and I don't think this quite captures all of them, but these will include proofreading, updating, and uploading content to the website, tracking media coverage of the IFG's work and producing media roundups, which really helps us to understand whether our reports are getting picked up, how our arguments are landing, and also helping to organize and deliver public events and roundtables, which are a key opportunity for us to achieve impact with our work. As Nicola mentioned earlier on, you can only apply for one of these roles, so make sure that you've kind of made that decision beforehand. So all of that might seem a little bit vague. So what we've tried to do is put together some examples of things that we've all worked on this year to give you a bit more of an idea about what it is that we actually get up to. So these are some explainers that Bryony and I have written on Metro Mayors and the Public Bodies Review Programme, respectively. For me, this was based on a combination of desk research and interviews with senior figures from public bodies to kind of understand their experience of the review programme, whether it had been positive, what could be improved, how it compared to previous programs. And for Bryony, this is an explainer that she published last week, which covers everything that you need to know about Metro Mayors, including who they are, what the process is for electing them. There's so much information in there. I would say it's a really great place to go if you're looking to kind of understand what it is that we produce. This is an example of a longer report, which I mentioned earlier. This is one that Finn, the intern on our ministers team, worked on the benefits of transparency in government. Finn told me that it was great being able to lead on research interviews and being able to get into detailed, high-quality research, such as looking through archive papers. It's really exciting as an intern to be able to get involved in these larger reports, and again, not the kind of level of responsibility that you get in lots of other internships. This is an example of some of the data work that you might get involved in. It's a beautiful chart on civil service consultancy spending from Samir in a publication called Whitehall Monitor. Interns on every team get to work on data visualizations like this. So if you have experience with doing that beforehand, that's great. But if not, you will get training on the role. And we have a very specific style guide for producing charts, and yeah, which makes them all looking great like this one. It's something we pride ourselves on. This is another chart which Jeremy, our intern on the public finances team, made. I think he made this chart specifically to win an argument on Twitter about when the budget was going to be. So you can see that, like, yeah, we get involved in social media and all that sort of thing as well. And finally, this is a piece of work from Darwin, who you'll hear from in a bit, which is a weekly blog on the state of public services, drawing on research published by other think tanks and charities. Again, that's another great resource if you want to find out a bit more about what interns produce here at the IFG. So now that you've seen the sort of things that we produce, I thought it might be useful to see what a typical day is like for an intern. The slightly irritating answer is that there is no such thing as a typical day. Lots of teams here work on things that are quite responsive to political events. So for example, if you're on the minister's team, a lot of work is responding to cabinet reshuffles, updating charts, updating explainers, so it's not always completely predictable. But that being said, I've made a fictional few days in my calendar here to give you an idea of what a couple of days as an intern might look like. I won't go through everything, but there are a couple of things that I'll point out. Every Monday, we have something called MMM, which stands for Monday Morning Meeting, where teams will update each other on what they're getting up to in the week, what sort of meetings they're having. Then you can see in blue that most days you'll have some combination of internal meetings, whether that be with your team to check in on the progress of your work, or with other teams in the IFG, like the communications team. You'll also have external meetings. These might be regular catch-ups with a team of civil servants working on an area related to your team's work, or they might be one-off research interviews, which I mentioned earlier. And it really depends on which team you're in, what the combination of those things will be. Alongside this in green, you can see different research tasks that I mentioned. I've scheduled these in here, but in reality, this time is a lot more self-directed, and it's a matter of your own organization and prioritization in discussion with your line manager. And most importantly, on Wednesday, you might notice Cake Wednesday, which is where every week a few people bring in cakes that they've made, or sometimes brought from Tesco's, and you take a bit of time off work and have a chat with colleagues. As Bryony said, it's a very friendly workplace, and there's lots of wellbeing initiatives, a chance to take a break and kind of get to know everyone a bit better. Another example, one of my favorites, is the quarterly book club that we do, which Nicola runs, where we kind of do fiction and non-fiction, and it's a great chance to just have a chat with everyone. So now you've seen what it is that interns do in more detail. That raises the question, what skills do you need to excel in the role? So the first thing is strong critical thinking skills. This is the ability to gather information from a range of sources, understand and evaluate their arguments, and assess them for things like accuracy, comprehensiveness, and bias. The second thing is great written and oral communication skills. You have to do a lot of writing in this job, and you have to be quite confident in changing your writing style for different audiences. I found it quite difficult to be able to adjust from kind of academic writing to a more kind of conversational style in some contexts. And you also have to be confident in engaging in discussions with MPs, civil servants, alongside your colleagues. Last but definitely not least, enthusiasm and interest. As Bryony said, you don't necessarily need to know a lot about your subject area before you join your team, and you don't need to have studied politics, but what you do need is an interest in the IFG's mission of improving government effectiveness, and a willingness to kind of get stuck in and develop new skills. And finally, I thought it might be helpful to give you an idea about what previous interns have gone on to do. So interns are free to apply to permanent roles at the IFG when they come up, and a number of staff here were first employed as interns, but there's no guarantee of a role after an internship. So I thought I'd just take you through some other things that people have gone on to do. So first is working at other think tanks. I've put down Demos here, but other think tanks are available. This is a very common thing that interns go on to do. There's also the civil service, so we've had people go on to work for Department for Work and Pensions and go into the fast stream. Political parties, working as parliamentary assistants for MPs and in communications, that sort of thing. Working in consultancies, for example, the PSC, which is the public sector consultancy. And finally, charities like Cancer Research UK and the Prince's Trust, just to name a few.
Okay, great. Thanks for going through that, Callum. Hopefully you now feel like you understand a little bit more about the IFG as well as the role. But if anything is unclear or any questions have come up, please feel free to throw them into the Q&A, and we'll be coming to that later. And for now, we'll move over to Nicola and Darwin to hear more about the application process itself.
Thank you. Okay, so as Bryony said, I'm going to talk a little bit now about the application process for our internships. It's a little bit different to the more sort of traditional and CV and cover letter approach that you might have encountered before. So I'm going to take you through the different bits of it, and then Darwin's going to give some advice about how to approach the whole thing. If any of you have already applied to us before or are working on an application for our comms internship, some of this will probably be a little bit familiar to you already. But first, I'm just going to talk quickly about our requirements and sort of stuff around eligibility. So the only qualification criteria that we have is a 2-1 in your undergraduate degree. And as you've already heard, that can be in any subject. It doesn't have to be in politics or anything related to politics even. You don't need a postgraduate degree. You're welcome to apply if you have one, but you don't need one. And candidates who have postgraduate degrees they aren't inherently more attractive to us. So you don't get any extra points, in the sort of review process for having a master's or another sort of postgraduate qualification. You need to have completed your university studies by the time the internship is due to start in September. This is very important. All of our internships start in September and then go from September to sort of the end of August the following year. The internships are full-time jobs. They are not intended for candidates who will be studying alongside them. And this includes people who are looking for a sandwich year or a year in industry or sort of placement, a year-long placement as part of their degree. You need to have finished your degree by the time the internship's due to start. If that's not you, it's not the right time for you. Come back to us when you're finishing off. And the other thing to say about sort of requirements is that you need to be able to work in the UK full-time without employer sponsorship. So if you are someone who needs a visa to be allowed to work in the UK, then that needs to be a visa that does not require employer sponsorship as part of it. Things that we don't require. So as I've said, we don't ask for CVs or for cover letters. You don't need to have studied a particular subject. You don't have to have gone to a particular university. There is a place in the application form where we ask you to fill in your sort of educational background and qualifications and tell us about any relevant experience that you have, but we don't assess those things or factor them in when we're deciding who's going to progress through the process. It's just useful for us to have that information about the sorts of different people that are applying and that are interested in us. And we don't use CVs and cover letters mostly because we think that asking candidates specific questions that are tailored to the particular role and the particular skills that we're looking for, that are asking them about their interests and their ideas and their experience, it just gives us a better sense of whether they're a good fit for the vacancy that we're looking to fill than a sort of generic cover letter. And you don't, it's also worth saying, you don't need to have previous experience in a think tank or of working in politics or government at all. We have no sort of specific experience requirements. So what does the application process look like? So we've got 3 main components here, and I'm going to go through each of them with you. So you've got the timed multiple choice test and then 3 short written questions. That's sort of the application. You submit that all together. And then if you're shortlisted, then there's an interview, which we usually do online. And it's important to say, and Callum mentioned this earlier as well, the application process for the communications internship and the research internships, they both have this same structure. They've both got those same 3 components, but they're separate processes, and you can't apply to both within the same year. So you have to apply for comms or research in the same application year. So, multiple choice test. Usually you'll have around 40 minutes to complete 20 questions in this part of the application. It can fluctuate a little bit year to year in sort of length, so amount of time you have, number of questions, and the multiple choice test in the comms internship this year, for instance, is a little bit shorter than this, but this is the sort of the length you'd usually expect, about 40 minutes, about 20 questions. The test will have a mix of different types of questions, and for research interns that will be a mix of verbal reasoning, numeracy, data interpretation. We also often now include questions that are sort of assessing your attention to detail and your ability to sort of spot mistakes quickly in text. As I mentioned, the test is timed, and it's got to be completed in one sitting, so you can't stop halfway through, save, go back to it later. You've got to do it in one go. And once you've completed it, you can't go back in again and look at it again. Once it's finished, it's finished. So that, it might sound really obvious, but try and make sure you're doing that bit of the application in a sort of somewhere quiet where you're not going to be distracted, and where you've got a good Wi-Fi connection, and where you have access to a laptop or a desktop computer as well. I'd strongly advise against trying to do any of this on a phone. It just gets too sort of fiddly. You can't see the questions properly. It's not worth the stress of it. If you usually get or have got, when you were at university, extra time for exams, maybe because you're dyslexic or because you've got a disability where you need those sorts of adjustments, please do get in touch with us before you start the test and let us know, because we're very happy to arrange for extra time for candidates who need that for accessibility reasons. So please do that if that's you. And in general, if you have any technical problems, either with the test or with any other bit of the application, let us know as soon as you can. If you're in doubt, if you've had a technical problem, and that's impeded you in some way, get in touch with us when you can. So that's one half of the application. The second half of the application is these 3 written questions. So each of these questions has got a word limit of 250 words, so they're not super long. And broadly speaking, we are using these questions to get a sense of your interests, your ideas, your abilities. We tend to tweak the questions a little bit each year, so they're not exactly the same for every single application, but for research interns, the questions will generally cover your motivation for applying, so your sort of why you're interested in this sort of job, why you're interested in the IFG's work and mission, your ideas about the IFG's work and what it might be interesting for us to do in the future, and also your sort of capacity to digest information and pick out the most interesting things in that information from an IFG perspective. This part of the application isn't time limited, so you can go back in and save and go back in and out as much as you like. Just make sure you've submitted by the deadline. It doesn't submit itself; you have to press submit. So remember to do that. And the other thing to say about this bit of the application is that each of your answers to the 3 written questions will get assessed separately and anonymously by multiple people. And it really is anonymously. People reviewing it will not know anything else about you. They won't even know if they've read another bit of your application. They're marking their question 2s. They won't know if they've marked your answer to question 1s. They've only got the response to that question. So it's worth bearing that in mind when you're answering them. And finally, the question of AI and the use of ChatGPT in these sorts of questions. So as these tools have become more readily and widely available, lots of people are now using them, to help them write job applications. And certainly in the last year or so at IFG, we've seen an increase in applications that we've received where the candidates have clearly used these sorts of tools to greater and lesser degrees to help them. And I would strongly advise you against using them for these sorts of questions, partly because what we've observed in application rounds where it's clear that quite a lot of people have used those tools is that it results in a lot of very, very similar answers, very, very similar applications in terms of tone, in terms of structure, in terms of the actual ideas that the applications contain, the sort of the content. They're all very similar. And that makes it quite difficult for us to get a sense of you as an individual candidate, because it's very similar to a lot of the other applications that we're seeing. And so then it's more difficult for you to stand out, particularly in larger candidate pools. So in many instances, you aren't sort of necessarily helping your own chances to progress through the process. And it's also worth saying that that our online application platform asks people to certify whether they have that their application is all their own work. So that will be a box that you have to tick. And our reviewers do have ChatGPT AI generated sample answers to look at while they're marking. So that's just something that's sort of worth bearing in mind. It's just the last thing to say about that is that it's really important to try and give us as much a sense of you as you can, an insight into your own thinking as possible. That's what we're using the questions for, right? So it's just worth bearing that in mind. So you've completed the test, you've written your answers, you've submitted your application. what happens next. So once the deadline has passed, we look at candidates' multiple choice test scores first. That's the sort of first stage. And those people who've got a good score on the test will then progress to the second round of assessment, which is where your answers to those 3 written questions that we were talking about get reviewed and given a score by each of the people who's marked them. All those scores get averaged together, so each candidate gets an overall score. And like I said, applications are reviewed name blind. Reviewers haven't got any access to any other identifying information about candidates, and then we choose our shortlist from among those who've got the highest overall scores. Once we've selected the shortlist, we will invite candidates to an online interview. We'll send you, if you're shortlisted, a selection of interview times to choose from, and then we'll confirm that with you. And we'll also let you know who's going to be interviewing you. Intern interviews are usually done by members of the research team, or the comms intern, it'll be members of the communications team. So we'll let you know in advance. You'll know in advance who you'll be meeting. And if you're shortlisted, we might also ask you to complete a short additional task of some kind, either before or after your interview. We don't always do this, but sometimes we do. Or we might ask you to prepare something specific to talk to us about more as part of your interview. And in the interview itself, we'll sort of explore your ideas and your experience in more detail. We'll maybe ask you to build on some of the things you've told us in your application. And the idea is to find out more about you and whether you're a good fit for the job, not to sort of catch you out. And that leads me smoothly onto handing over to Darwin, who obviously went through this process successfully, as everybody else here, this time last year, with some advice on how to approach the application process itself.
Yes, so thanks for that, Nicola. So hi, I'm Darwin. I'm the intern for the public services team, and I'm just here to give you some tips for your application. It might seem like quite unfamiliar, maybe with some people a bit of a difficult process, but here are just some things you can keep in mind to increase your chance of success. So the first tip I have for you is just to have a look over the IFG's mission and the existing research on this website. So just have a quick browse over what all the teams do and just see if there's a topic that interests you in particular. There's no need to read the report from cover to cover and try to memorize as many facts as you try, but if you just find something that you fancy, something that you want to go into more detail, then feel free to consider. And this is something that will also come to really help you when you come to writing your answers, and if you're fortunate, as I hope you all are, with the interview. Of course, just always keep in mind the IFG's mission, which is to make the government more effective, and this is also just something to just remember, and it's also another thing that will help you along. The second thing I have to say is that yes, at least the multiple choice test, that yes, it is time limited, so you may feel like you have to do it quite quickly, but take time to read the questions carefully. There are no trick questions on the test, but there are things where you may want to have another look to make sure you have the right answer. And having said that, the IFG does provide a sort of sample test with questions that are very similar to the ones that will come up on the website, so if you want, feel free to familiarize yourself with it before you sit the actual test. And this links to my third point. Yes, there are numerous questions there, but it's not a mental math test. Have a calculator on hand, have a pen and paper on hand, and this will just really help you when you have your working out. So if you do find yourself stuck on a question, again, like although there is a sort of hard time limit, you can go back and forth between questions. So move on to the next one and then come back once you feel like you can solve it. And so moving on to the next one, which is linked to the written one. This isn't time limited, so take your time in writing it, obviously before the deadline. So please take time to check your spelling and grammar. Like, it is just helpful for you, and it's helpful when it comes down to for everyone to check your answers and read it. And my final tip is actually the most important one, which is to relax. If you get to the interview, it's not a police interrogation. The researchers are all really friendly people. They all want to know more about you, what interests you, and to see if that you're a good fit for the organization. So just treat it as it is an interesting conversation, which will mostly be about politics, but again, about anything which the IFG does to make the government more effective. So if you're interested in this area, you'll find that it just really helps you along. And with further ado, I'll hand over to Samir for your questions.
Thanks. We now have some time for questions. You can still submit questions on Slido and do upvote other people's questions that you want to be answered. Not very much as a surprise, our top question is what stands out for you in an application? And perhaps, Nicola, you might be best placed to answer that.
Yeah, that isn't a surprise, is it really? So I think answers, one of the things I really like to see in answers that I'm marking or reviewing for internships, but also for all roles, is really clear writing. You don't have to necessarily be writing in IFG style, but your reviewers should be able to read the application and not have to read your answer a couple of times to figure out what it is that you're saying, or I'm not really clear what they mean there. I need to try and be as sort of clear and direct as you possibly can in your writing style, and sort of don't be sort of tempted to feel like I need to throw in loads of jargon. I need to use lots of buzzwords and because that's going to enhance my application in some way. Often it doesn't, and it can make your writing a little bit harder to pass. So I think the sort of being clear and direct in your communication is really useful. And I also think the sort of genuine interest in IFG's mission in particular. Obviously, loads of people are interested in politics and government and policy because it's fascinating. But it stands out, I think, when somebody is genuinely enthusiastic about our work, as Darwin was saying, about our mission, about improving government effectiveness. Those sorts of applications tend to have a little bit of extra something.
Sure, and I think that applies to both the written answers and the interview.
Yeah.
Great. We've got a question about, is it beneficial to have a master's degree? I think we've covered that. It's not inherently beneficial, so do apply if you have one or if you don't have one. Is there room to work within different policy areas during the internship? So I think, as Bryony mentioned, we are assigned to a particular team, but depending on that team's capacity and work streams, there may be some opportunity to work in different other teams. So, for example, I'm on the civil service and policy-making team, but I've been recently loaned to the public bodies team for some time just to work on our AI program, which I'm really excited about. But that was agreed with my manager, given that there's essentially spare capacity for me to do that. So that is very much team-specific, I would say.
And I think it's worth saying as well in general that, and I don't know if you guys agree, but that there's everybody at IFG is very generous with their time and really very keen to talk about what they're working on. So even if you're not working on a particular team, there's always a bunch of opportunities to learn about what other teams are doing, whether that's sitting down next to somebody at lunch and saying, what are you doing today? Or other more sort of structured sessions in the week about where people are feeding back on their work. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I'd also say that with different teams, they'll often hold events, and if you're really interested in an area, you can kind of volunteer to do the live tweeting or the Q&A for that session and kind of learn a bit more about it. So that's a way of kind of broadening your expertise without necessarily having to work on a specific area.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Is the internship remote or office-based? It is office-based, so we are told to come into the office 3 times a week, 3 days a week, for full-time staff, and everyone comes in on a Monday, which is actually very nice. But yes, it is full-time in the office. What future opportunities can this internship help you pursue? I think we've covered some of the things that previous interns have gone to do within politics and government, civil service, consultancies, etc. I would say the skills that we get in the internship are very suitable for a broad range of careers. I think the general critical thinking, like data analysis, ability to express oneself clearly, I think they're all very useful. And hence why a lot of previous interns have gone on to quite a wide range of careers. Are IFG internships suitable for experienced applicants or primarily targeted at new graduates? Definitely, we get a lot of experienced applicants who have spent a number of years and sometimes decades in other careers. So absolutely, please do apply if that applies to you. Are there any socials within work, such as society groups, faith, sports, etc.?
Do you want to take that one? Callum, you take it.
I don't know, where do I start? No, there are plenty of social opportunities. So I mentioned the book club is a great one. what else do we have? Like
There's the regular stuff that happens. So like you said, there's Cake Wednesday, there's book club, there's we have an occasional series called Masterminds, which is run by our colleague Sachin, where 3 or 4 colleagues every time come and talk about their the clue's in the title, the Masterminds topic that isn't anything to do with work. And we really have had all sorts on that. We've had people talking about Lego, we've had people talking about the Eurovision Song Contest.
petrol pricing.
Really anything and everything. We also have a relatively recent addition. We do Desert Island Discs now, so every sort of month or so, our colleague Sophie picks someone and they have chosen their 5 favourite tracks and talk to us about that. And there are other sort of structured, organised fun socialising after work. So
There's a social committee that organises certain things, and I think there's generally, if you can find appetite, you can kind of set up your own thing.
Yeah.
The occasional quiz.
There's a lot of appetite for quizzing, I feel. That isn't, you don't have to be into quizzing to be here, but so there's a lot of scope and opportunity for people to socialise with each other.
A number of questions have asked about the distinction between the comms and research internships and the different kinds of skills and responsibilities and what distinctions you would make. Perhaps, Nicola, that's one for you.
That's a good question. I think really the key question to ask yourself about, I imagine there'll be quite a few people thinking, well, I can only apply to one, so should I apply to communications or to research? And I think the key thing is thinking about whether, do you want to be doing the research or do you want to be talking about the research or kind of getting the research out there? And that is a sort of an overly simplistic distinction, because our research teams also do a lot of thinking about how to communicate their research to relevant audiences. But I think it's if what you really want to be doing is getting into the deep details on a topic, and as Callum said, interviewing people, writing reports, writing explainers, doing data analysis, then probably the research internship is your more natural fit. Whereas if you're interested in how do we get our messages out there, what sort of different methods can we use for getting our messages out there, how can we use social media and other communication tools in innovative ways to do that, and also that's sort of, you're probably leaning more towards the comms intern there. And the other thing I think that the comms internship has a particular benefit is that you get to work with everybody across the whole organisation, because everybody needs the comms team. So that's sort of, if you're the sort of person that wants to be involved in lots of different things and likes to work with lots of different people, the comms intern might be a particularly good fit for you. The research teams don't stay sort of siloed in their own little bunkers, but the comms team and the comms intern are really working across the full organisation. So those are the things I think that it's worth thinking about when you're thinking about which one works best for you.
Great, thanks, Nicola. Perhaps one for Bryony and Darwin. What skills do you say you drew upon the most? What do you need to be good at? Are you surprised by this? I know you did mention some of those things in your presentation, so maybe you can kick off.
I mean, it sounds a bit boring, but definitely the researching skills and like the analytical, critical reading skills are the ones that I draw on the most, because quite a lot of my work tends to be kind of desk-based research at the moment as we're like building up to a report. I don't know, are there any that have surprised you that you've needed, Darwin?
I'll probably say one thing you get as a research intern is just how in-depth you get put into the research pretty much from the start. You're not just kind of doing like admin support, you're there, you're doing the sort of literature reviews, you're there doing the data analysis, you're there conducting interviews and taking notes during roundtable, and that is something to keep in mind.
Yeah, it's sort of, there's an in at the deep end feeling, I think. Not that there's also a lot of support there for interns to develop their skills very quickly, but Darwin is the public services intern, and where the public services intern starts in the cycle of that team is that September is an intense time for the public services team, right? So you're sort of in very intense work, very important research, very important writing very quickly.
Yep.
I guess on that line, like, it's not really a skill, but we included enthusiasm and interest as skills. So I feel like it can be as just like the ability to jump into things, because there's just so many different things that pop up within a team. So like event organization and like coordinating with the events team and stuff like that wasn't necessarily things that I realized I was going to be doing when I came. So
yeah, I think there is tremendous opportunity to do what you want to do, and if there's something that you're passionate about and piques your interest, there's definitely a chance to just jump in and get stuck in. What is IFG doing to be inclusive with ethnic minorities? Perhaps that's one for Callum and Nicola. We do have a number of initiatives with that.
Yeah, so one of the things that part of our sort of thinking around diversity and inclusion is the application process that I talked you through earlier. Part of the reason we use that process is because we find that it's more inclusive to people from ethnic minority groups, but also from other underrepresented groups than CVs and cover letters are. I touched on this a little bit earlier. We did some research a couple of years ago, like a research project around diversity and inclusion in think tanks, which also included thinking about how people from ethnic minority backgrounds are represented in the sector, and that wasn't just about us, that was about the think tanks more broadly. So that's sort of some of the core things that we're thinking about, and in general the organisation puts sort of inclusivity and well-being quite high, in fact very high, on its sort of priorities. It's something that's very important to our director and deputy director, and it's something that we are also working on, so it's not everything to do with diversity and inclusion is not a sort of, there's no end goal that you sort of get there, you've ticked various boxes, like, okay, we're done now, we're finished, we're an inclusive organisation, well done everybody, we don't have to try anymore. And this also, I think, touches on the sort of, the question was obviously about people from ethnic minorities, but there are lots of different ways of measuring inclusivity and diversity, and I think our organisation, just like lots of other organisations in the sector, does better on some metrics than other metrics, certainly in terms of recruitment and the representation among our staff. For instance, we have a very sort of healthy gender balance in the organisation, and a lot of our senior positions are, including obviously our most senior positions, are women. We also have very good LGBT representation, and I think that's sort of things that we're pleased with and continuing to work on, but there are other metrics that we are trying to improve more, and one of those is people from ethnic minorities, people with disabilities, people from low-income backgrounds.
Thanks. Anything to add?
No, I was just going to say, I think, it's definitely something that we're continually working on. This event is kind of part of a diversity and inclusion initiative to try and make the internship more accessible, and the research that Nicola referenced, I think it's called Diversity in the Think Tank Sector, I think is the name of the report, is a really interesting report that was commissioned by the IFG that addresses kind of some of the barriers to work in the think tank sector from people from all sorts of backgrounds. And we're just trying to kind of implement the findings from that report, kind of the short-term ones, and working on the longer-term goals as well.
Right. Two related questions. If you're associated with a political party, or for example, if you're a councillor or MP, can you still apply? And what kinds of political action are interns restricted from doing during the internship, e.g. protests? Nicola, again, that might be... one for you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And obviously something that a lot of people thinking about applying, not just to the internship, but to lots of different roles at IFG, we're thinking about, because people who are interested in our work are also likely to be politically engaged people who have strong political views and might have previously been involved in direct political activity of some kind. And what I would say is that the organisation is non-party political. We're not aligned with any particular political parties or political positions, and so staff, including interns, have to be prepared to have that line also. So and that's reflected in your social media. That's something that people often ask when they start about what the rules are about social media use. And you have to be able to represent IFG's non-party political stance while you're working here. So that's a sort of key thing to think about. If candidates have got specific sort of questions about a particular thing that they do, like I'm involved in a particular political activity right now, and I'm not sure if I would need to stop that or what I would need to do or pause it for the duration of the internship. I think if you're worried about that, email me and ask us about the details of it. And that's probably your sort of safest bet, because there might be slight differences depending on the particular nature of the activity. So if in doubt, email and ask.
And how do we let you know that we qualify for extra time?
Email me.
There's an email on the next slide, actually, if you...
Yes, if you click on one, there we go. So recruitment@instituteforgovernment.org.uk. I am on the end of that email address. So if you qualify for extra time, email me, let me know that you're thinking about doing an application and you would require extra time for the multiple choice test. The thing that's worth remembering about that is in order to make that happen for you, you need to have an application in progress on the system. You don't have to have filled loads of it in, you just need to have your name and your contact details filled in. But that you need to have set that up before I can help you. So if that's you, do that first and then email me.
Great. Could you tell us when interviews for shortlisted candidates usually take place, if you have any idea?
They usually take place I would say, between 3 and 4 weeks after the deadline, usually. It depends a little bit on obviously what else is going on in the organisation, on sort of scheduling logistical, on the scheduling and logistical side. But that's usually about a good sort of ballpark timeline.
Great. Another popular question, can each of the interns tell us a little bit about their background, degrees, straight from undergrad, other experience? Perhaps we could
Shall we go along?
Start with Callum.
Yeah, sure. So I did an undergraduate degree in politics and philosophy at Lancaster University, and then I did a master's in public policy at UCL, and then came straight here. Like, I handed in my dissertation and then I arrived. Was pretty much I ended up. So yeah, that's for me. Was there any other part of the question, or was that?
Well, also why they wanted to apply, but I think we've covered that extensively. So.
Cool.
So I actually had a career break in between I had a different career in between my undergraduate and my master's. So I did a master's at SOAS in human rights law, and then applied in the following year while I was working as an operations assistant at a manufacturing company.
I had a very similar trajectory in Callum. I did an undergrad degree and a master's degree in economic history, both at LSE. Then I came here, pretty much, as Callum said, just after submitting everything.
Intense time for everyone.
And I did an integrated master's course in natural sciences, and then I did the 6-week civil service fast stream internship, and then I came straight here. But it's also worth giving a shout out to one of the other interns who had a long career for a number of decades before doing a master's and a career change, and is now at the IFG. So you really can come from any background.
Also, the remaining 2 interns that aren't on the stage both came straight from undergrad, I think, or undergrad and then like an internship. So,
are there any shadowing opportunities with other areas of the work? I think we've kind of covered this. I would say because this is very much, it very much feels like a full-time role. It's not so much of a shadowing kind of role. So you will be working with your team. However, as we have said, there is a lot of opportunity to get involved with other things if you want, although that will depend on your team. I'm just searching for questions.
Is it worth talking a little bit, do you think, about well, I'm thinking about this because we recently filmed a Meet the Interns video. So if you've been on our website already, you've seen the video from last year's intern cohort, which is like a sort of 12-minute video of all the different interns talking about their experiences and the different stuff that they've worked on. And one of the things we talk about in that video that we've just filmed on our new version is sort of things that surprised you about coming to IFG, or things that you weren't expecting, and also the thing that you like most. So I'm wondering if maybe it would be useful for people to hear about that. I don't know. Samir, do you want to start answering that?
Sure. What were the questions?
Sort of what you've enjoyed most about being IFG.
Sure. I think it's definitely got to be the people. I really look forward to coming into the office. I try to come in as often as I can, even though I lose out on a bit more sleep. But it's definitely worth it. Everyone's very supportive, interested in what I'm doing. They want to talk about what they're doing, and it's just a really nice environment, and the conversations are great. Yeah.
I also like to stress there's a really, really friendly environment, and there's no sort of real seniority. All the senior members are very happy to talk to you. If you've got any questions, if you're interested in the research, and as Barney mentioned, during lunchtime, everyone sits together. It's all very much like a one-team environment.
Yeah. It's worth saying as well that our senior team, including our director and deputy director, sit in the office with the rest of us, and that's a sort of they're very accessible to the whole organisation, including interns.
Yeah, I mean, I seem a bit mean now if I don't go the people are the best, but just to have something else apart from just the amazing people that you get to work with.
We'll assume that you like all of them.
Yeah, I love everyone at the IFG. They're all great. I think the ability to do proper research and go properly into things, when I say that people listen to what you have to say, they really do. You can actually feed into recommendations in reports that then you send out to different people to get their opinions on, which is just quite cool for, I guess, the entry-level position at an organisation to be able to do that much.
For sure, I would definitely second that. I think there's sometimes there's a interpretation of internship as being you get given all the menial jobs, but you do really get to do really interesting research, leading on interviews with senior politicians or figures in public bodies. In my team is really exciting. And the other thing I would say is the variety of the work that you get to do. You get to do lots of work with data, especially if you enjoy doing that. You can get to work with massive big databases and get really into the data work. You get to do stuff on events, which is also really exciting. So I'd say getting to do all of those different things in a single role is maybe the thing that surprised me and I enjoy the most about it.
Great. I think that's probably all we have time for in the Q&A.
Yeah.
If I pass to Nicola now to conclude.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, so yes, that's probably about all we've got time for. Thanks very much for joining us. I hope that was useful and helpful. And if you were on the fence about whether to apply for an internship, I hope we've pushed you off the fence. And that you're going to apply to either the comms or to the research intern. So as I said at the beginning, we will, the recording of this session is going to be available soon on our website, and we'll send a link around to that to everybody who's registered, along with the feedback form and the links that we've got on this slide here for our careers page, and also to another similar event that was about working think tanks generally, that Resolution Foundation, which is another think tank, put on recently. like I said, applications for our next round of research internships will be open in the next few weeks, and the communications internship applications are open now. You can sign up to receive recruitment updates from us on the first sort of careers page, and then if you do that, we'll be able to email you when applications open for research interns or for any other roles that you're interested in. So thanks to everybody, thanks to Samir and Darwin and Brian and Callum for chatting about this. Thank you again to you for watching, and very best of luck with your application.